If you haven't done this yet, you really should. Discover in this session how to reach your first 100,000 customers with Peter Sorgenfrei. Now, Peter Sorgenfrei is an entrepreneur and he has spent the past 15 years starting and building companies in the US, UK, and Denmark, serving as the founder and CEO. And he has experienced the full spectrum of entrepreneurship, from being one of two people in a garage startup to leading large teams across multiple countries. Now, the first question is, what's the secret to your success? And how can entrepreneurs reach their first 100,000 customers? Welcome to Awakened Titans podcast with Lily Patrascu, mind-blowing conversations with influential business titans sharing how you can manifest abundance, love, joy, success through quantum awakening, quantum manifestation, quantum healing, quantum miracles, exponential business growth, and innovative products and services.
Well, thanks for having me, Lily. I think the secret to my success is I'm good at not dying. I'm good at not giving up, right? Because what happens oftentimes when you're building a company, at some point you're getting to that stage where you're like, should I pack up and go home or should I keep going? And I've just had an incurable optimism and said, I can solve this. I can move beyond this point and succeed. So I think that's a big part of the secret for why I've been successful across 6 different companies.
Great. So tell us about how entrepreneurs can reach their first 100,000 customers.
Well, it depends on whether you're selling ice cream on a hot summer day or whether you're selling something a little bit more difficult. But I think the paramount, the key here is to have set the business up from day one for it to be able to scale. 100,000 customers is actually really difficult to manage when you think about people having an interface to you, right? Whether it's an app or whether it's a physical service or whether they're buying teacups that you're designing, it doesn't really matter. 100,000 people is a lot of people. So if you don't have the systems from the beginning to actually be able to scale your operations, you will never get to that number. What that actually means is when you're starting a business, don't do things manually for too long that you can either automate or outsource in some way, right? So you need to figure out what are the things that only I, Peter, can do in this business, and what is something that can be automated or can be outsourced so that somebody else can handle it or some system can handle it, because that's the only way we go beyond the one-on-one, like you and I are today, to the one-to-many, which is required to get to 100,000 users.
Thank you. Now, let's say I'm an entrepreneur and I'm well aware that I should be delegating and I know exactly where to find the people to delegate and I have the right people to delegate to as well. The only problem is, imagine there's no funding. What do you do in that situation?
Well, there's no funding in most business to start with, right? So obviously it comes with a resource constraint, but there are so many free ways or simple ways that you can automate things in your business. Obviously, software is one of them, right? Another one that can free up resources is, this is going to be a little bit longer conversation, but most entrepreneurs do too many things at the same time, and that's why they don't have the resources or the time to do them. So they're focusing on product development and marketing and hiring and all sorts of other things at the same time. And so when I meet in my current business, when I meet clients, I look at what their activities are and I say, if you don't have the resources or don't have the time, it's because you don't have a priority of what you want to be doing. So in most cases, you can actually take out activities or take out cost in the business, and from there, reinvest that time or expense into something that allows you to scale. So it's a question of focus to get there.
Thank you. How can entrepreneurs find their first 10 customers?
They are right around you. They're in your phone right now. There are your friends and family. You know, the kindest thing anybody can do for somebody who's building a business is to become their first customer. So ask them, right? If I was in the business of selling something, you could be damn sure that I at some point would call you up and say, hey, Lily, would you take a look at this thing that I'm selling? You might want to buy it. So we all know more than 10 people that we can ask. The reason people don't do that is they're afraid of the rejection. If I show you my new thing and say, hey, Lily, my friend, I built this thing, would you please buy it? And you say, nah, I don't really need it. That rejection is what's keeping people from actually selling in the beginning.
Thank you. So how can entrepreneurs go around this rejection and be a big success?
Well, I don't think you can go around it. I think you have to go through it. I think you have to realize that no matter what you do, where you do it, you're going to be rejected, right? We've all been rejected in our lives in some way or another by, me in elementary school by the girl that I wanted to take to the dance. She said no. All right, fine. I'm still here. So the thing to do is tell everybody about what you're doing. Tell everybody why what you're doing matters. And then tell everybody how it would make you feel if they became a customer of yours. A lot of these people are not going to become customers, but some of them are. And before long, you're going to forget all the people that said no.
Thank you. I remember my first 10 customers. Mm-hmm. And what I remember about them is that first, it was very hard to get them. And when they did come, because I didn't have a team to actually deliver, I had to do most of the stuff myself, and it was so hard. I overwhelmed myself. I was burnt out, and I pretty much resented them as well for it. So I do wonder, how do you go around that? Because initially, when you're starting out, you don't have any funds to kind of, pay other people to do the work that they could do a lot better than you. And you also know that you really should be delegating, because there are so many people that for very little money could do something a lot better than you right now.
I have this conversation pretty much every single week with somebody who's starting their first company, and they don't have the money, or they think they don't have the money. Again, it's a question of focus and priorities, right? If you look at many big businesses, they were built by men and women who made choices in their life to reduce the quality of their life in a period to build this thing, right? So it's the famous, they lived off ramen noodles all the time, or they did certain things. So the first thing you need to do is you need to look at, how am I spending my time and my resources? And is there anywhere where I can get some freedom from that? The vast majority of people, all the people listening to this, there's something you can cut from your budget that allows you to invest in yourself and in your business. The reason you're not doing it is because you don't want to. It's not because you can't do it. So that's point number one. Point number two, I tell people that the first hire you have in many, many businesses essentially should be an administrative assistant of some sort, a virtual assistant. It's the best money you'll ever spend, because that person is going to take all the things that are not unique, something you can do, and do that for you. Whether it's emailing people, whether it's making social media content, whether it's organizing travel, whether it's doing your books, whatever it is, all that stuff you shouldn't be spending any time on when you can find a resource, hopefully in a lower cost country than where you are, to do that for you. But most people see having an assistant as a luxury because it's associated with, that's something a big CEO has. He has an assistant, or she has an assistant. That's the wrong way to think about it. The way you need to think about it is, I'm buying time. I'm freeing up my own time by having somebody else do all the stuff that somebody else can do. So that's the first place I would make an investment if I started a company.
Thank you. How do you go from, let's say, I don't know, your first 10, 50 customers to your first 100 customers?
A little bit the same thing, right? You're my customer. I go to you and say, hey, Lily, do you enjoy using the product or service that you bought from me? Hopefully the answer is yes. I'm like, Lily, I could really use the help of you telling 20 people about what it is that I do. Here's the material to do that. I've written the email for you. I've done the samples. Here's all this other stuff. Is there anything else I can do for you to tell 20 people about what it is that I do? I would really appreciate that. Most people will do that for you if you make it easy for them and if they actually enjoyed the experience. Some of them will say no, but most people will actually do that. Again, back to where people are struggling is they do not ask, right? And that's what's tripping us up. It's our own fear of rejection. But once you get past that point, you'll see that the most people in the world will help you succeed if you ask them.
Thank you. One thing that I discovered when I was trying to scale my company from the very first customers to the next ones was that the very first customers hadn't paid in full, because they were, I allowed them to pay in installments. So then I had almost like a default moving forward. So I do wonder what you suggest to people that have to take up financing in order to allow the first customers to benefit from their product or service, and where they find that financing is actually not coming in at all because the customers are not paying because maybe you did the wrong contracts or you did something else that kind of messed up the situation. And therefore, let's say you are now willing to go to the next level, but you don't have the funds to do it. What do you do then?
So I would change the premise a little bit. I'd bet on myself rather than betting on my customer's ability to pay. And I'd say to the customer, pay me in full now. And if at any point you're not completely satisfied and happy with what I'm going to do, I'm going to refund you 100% of the money. Again, back to most people will never ask you for that money back. Some people will, yes. You can be afraid that somebody's going to take advantage of you, yes. But the vast majority of people, even if what you deliver is not perfect, they understand the situation you're in. And if you're not asking for some giant amount of money from them, they're going to write it off as okay, that wasn't perfect, but I kind of supported her. And by the way, she's my friend because we're talking about the first customers. So that's going to be okay. So I would ask for the money and offer 100% guarantee. And people are catching on to this. A lot of people are doing this. So this is not a new idea. That's number one. Number two is maybe what you're selling hasn't proven its value to that customer yet. So the question to ask yourself is there a variation of what I'm selling that I can sell at a price point so it's not a question about paying in full? So for example, in my business, some of my customers are like, ooh, that's a lot of money to work with you, Peter. I'm like, yes, it is, because it's really good what I do. But if you're not at the point where you will make that investment, here's a version of what I do that has less deliverables, that is less involved, less dedicated to you, that is at a lower price point. Then you get the experience of working with me, and then you can decide whether you want to come to this other level. So you can also tailor your offer in a way that you don't get into a situation where you have to chase people for the last payment, because that's no fun. That's no way to live a life.
Thank you. What systems, processes, and procedures should be put in place to make sure that once you go from 100 customers to your first 1,000 customers, the process rolls smoothly? Because we all know that nobody has the same kind of like work ethic as you do. Nobody has the same interest in making the company work as you do, unless maybe you do something magical that you can tell us now that we should be doing in order to incentivize them to have that kind of same interest in making the company grow as you, the entrepreneur, has.
So if you're talking, it sounds like you're talking about my colleagues or the people that I would employ in the business. And since that's the case, now we're back to who do you hire, right? So as an entrepreneur, the first hires are the most important people. And what I see happening is people get busy and they're like, oh, I need to hire somebody. And they hire a VA and then they hire some other folks, but they hire them too fast. Not too fast in the life cycle of the business, but they don't spend enough time with these people to really understand, is Lily going to be there for our company in 2 years' time when shit hits the fan? I think I can say that, right? It's not swearing. And does she have the right personality? Does she have the right mentality? So the vast majority of startup founders hire too quickly and they hire too conveniently. So they hire somebody that they know or somebody that their uncle recommended or somebody that they worked with in a different context without actually seriously considering, what do I need this person for? What do they need to be able to do? And do they have the right mindset? So that's number one. Number two is incentivize people to do the right thing for the company. Not only financially, everybody, I'm a big believer in that everybody should participate in the equity and the ownership of the business. And that's easy to do today in terms of systems and processes so that your first 100 employees could be equity owners in the business. A lot of people don't do that because I don't want to give away this thing, my little baby, a little piece of my baby, to employee number 98. That's a mistake. Why? Because maybe your business doesn't exist in 3 years unless you do that, right? So people think short term when they think about equity. As you do that, that's the money side. The next thing is, if I've done my hiring correctly, and you and I are now colleagues, I need to give you an environment where you feel so strongly about what we're doing and the service and the product we're delivering to our customers that you will have the same mentality and live it like I do. It will never be one-to-one because, let's face it, this was my baby, but it still has to be damn close to that. And I do that by giving you care and respect and opportunity and really take care of you as my colleague. Founders struggle doing this. Why? Because they're busy raising money, they're busy doing marketing, they're busy doing all sorts of other stuff. And now we're back to the focus. Who do you need to care most about? Actually, it's your employees first, then it's your customers, and then it's everybody else. People sometimes do that in reverse. They worry about their marketing and getting on stages and speaking at conferences and writing on LinkedIn and doing all sorts of other stuff. They worry about their investors, which is fair, but they actually should worry mostly about their colleagues.
Thank you. One big issue that I had in the past was some of my clients poaching my staff. It caused a major issue because in the beginning, I had a smaller team and I was counting on that smaller team to perform different tasks. So one person, for example, was doing broadcasting for me for like motivational speaking events with thousands of people. And he was also doing graphic design or video editing and some other tasks. So one person was like really key. And like when you have a small business, you hire sometimes key people that can multitask. So missing one person in that team at the wrong moment can really cost you a lot of money. So I wonder, what do you suggest to make sure that you retain those key important people, employees in your business, and make sure that you retain them for a long period of time?
We're back to what we just talked about. I think in your case, I don't know the situation, I don't know the circumstance, but if you do your hiring right, and if you create the right environment, people actually don't leave. People typically leave because they don't have the right mentality. So somebody across the street comes with more money or more opportunity, and they think that's more valuable than being in your boat. Fine and fair, people's circumstances might dictate that. But I've had many situations where I've had colleagues who got offered much more money to go work for a much bigger brand than ours, but they chose to stay because they believed so much in the mission, they believed so much in the team that we've put together, that they'd rather have that experience than some other experience they could get somewhere else. It's not an easy issue. You will lose key colleagues for whatever reason. So the last thing I want to say about this is having a setup so that no one person is irreplaceable. I mean, even if you're 3 people in the business or 6 people in the business, it hurts when someone leaves. But it should be so that you can quickly reprioritize and say, okay, Lily decided to go to some other company. The things that Lily was responsible for, are we still going to do all of them? Probably not, because we can't. Which ones are the most important? These ones. Who's going to do them and how? Okay, fine, we move on. So you have to have a very sort of fluid organism to handle that.
Thank you. Tell us more about your personal experience with startups and growing companies and selling companies. And how did you manage to help companies to grow to their first 100,000 customers?
Well, in the case that I want to talk about, we delivered a service to municipalities in major cities. So we deliver a transportation service. So we had the benefit of, there was already a need for what we're doing. People need to move around in these cities. There was already an agenda at the city level of converting people from moving in personal cars to moving in shared autonomous vehicles, which is what we were building and offering. So we knew that there was a demand there. All we had to do was to show that our solution could meet that demand. So we didn't have to create the demand. And I think that's a key difference between many other businesses. There's a lot of people who go out and they solve a problem that no one actually has. And then they have to try and convince them that they have this problem. That's expensive. And then you have to convince them that your solution solves that problem. It's much easier and to be in a business of there is an actual problem that needs to be solved. So I think if people are struggling with getting enough customers for what they're doing, you need to ask yourself, have we actually identified the core problem that people have? When I look at investment pitches, because I get a bunch of people coming to pitch me for investment, 8 out of 10 don't have identified really that problem that they're going to solve. And so they won't get investment from me or from anybody else, and they get disappointed. And I always tell them, saying, well, you haven't proven that this problem is a problem that he's solving. Once you do that, anybody will give you money. But that's where you're struggling, that's where you're failing.
Thank you. So how do you go from 1,000 customers to many more?
So 1,000 customers to a bigger number is now we're beyond the stage where you can ask everybody. You can still ask everybody. You can still ask all these 1,000 people, hey, please tell your friends about us. Or if you tell your friends about us, then you get some benefit, discounts, and people do that all this stuff. But those techniques don't work as well as if the product or service you're selling is so good that people can't help but talk to others about it. That's how you get from 1,000 to many more. Or you have a built-in demand like we had in the last business, right? I mean, we literally had millions of people moving around cities every day. We just needed to provide access from A to B, and then some of those millions would go out and use our system. So if you're at 1,000 customers today and you're wondering how you're going to get to 10,000 or to 100,000, I would still argue you need to focus on the customer experience. You don't need to make a ton of Facebook ads. You don't need to spend a bunch of money on marketing. You need to make sure that those 1,000 customers are so happy with what you're delivering that they can't stop themselves from telling their friends, hey, look at my phone. I have this new thing that does this thing. Or I went to this experience and it was amazing because all these things. That's how you grow from 1,000 to 10,000 to 100,000.
Thank you. One thing that I found was really key in terms of building your business at any level was actually getting reviews. So I wonder, does the company that you are working with, does it have an automatic way of getting reviews? And if that is a key in terms of growing the business, and what tools to use in order to get these types of automatic reviews that can boost your bottom line?
So if you're in a services business of any kind, there are services like testimonials.ai, I think it's called, where people they automatically get a link from you and they can record a video testimonial or write a text testimonial, right? That's one way. If you are on Instagram or LinkedIn or some of these other social platforms, Facebook, there are built-in ways that people can recommend you or talk about your services on those platforms. If you're selling a physical product, or if you're like a hotel or a restaurant or something, there are things like Trustpilot and other platforms that you can ask people to review you on and give you stars. And so again, back to, you have your 10 customers, you start asking people manually about this stuff, but already at 10 customers, you should start practicing having that link that you sent to folks and saying, hey, if you enjoyed our experience, please give us a review here. And if you didn't enjoy our experience, let us know. We'll fix it no matter what. And then you'll give them a very personal service experience. This summer I traveled around Europe, and I went to hotels that were tiny, and they had literally 3,000 reviews. And I thought, this is a Chinese review bank that kind of just, this is some kind of fake reviews. So one night I literally spent to go through one of those hotels and see, and it wasn't fake. It was a bunch of people from all over the world. Probably all the guests that they'd had ever had reviewed them. Why? Because they gave them a stellar experience. They gave me a stellar experience, and they asked them, hey, it's super helpful for our business if you would review us. Could you please do that?
Yes, I love that. And what I found is that the best way to ask a review is when it's hot. So let's say you give a customer a really great experience, it's best to ask them for a review straight away, because after, in a week's time, you can ask for it and it's not going to get done because people are busy. So I do find that it's important to kind of continuously ask for a review. So I was wondering whether the companies you worked with, whether they had any automatic ways of getting reviews, or was it more like a manual way?
So there's an automated way, right? So mostly it's when you check out from whatever you're buying, there is an automated email that goes out and saying, hey, we'd love to get a review. If people don't do it, they get a reminder 2 or 3 days later, and then that's kind of it. But one company I've worked with does it a little bit differently. They basically send it immediately when you engage with them, saying, hey, we're going to ask you for a review as you go through this experience with us. Here's the link to the site. maybe you should bookmark it now. I mean, they're kind of a funny way of doing it, right? And so they essentially mention the review pretty much in every single interaction with people, so much so that folks get a little annoyed, but they go in and do it, and they still leave good reviews. So there are different ways of going about it.
Wow, that's so interesting. So tell us more about what elements do you feel were the biggest things that made the biggest difference to the startups that you worked with that catapulted them to hundreds of thousands of users and big business growth?
It comes back to the product. There's no way you can buy your way through marketing or advertising to 100,000 users, real users, if what you're delivering is not good. That's just not possible. So the companies that do well are the ones that have a singular focus on solving one problem for one customer and doing that well before they do a bunch of other stuff. We all know this, right? We've all read the books about this. And so it baffles my mind that more people don't do it, and they don't do it because they get distracted by all the stuff around it. So my advice is, look at whatever you're selling, see if you can do that simpler and better to more people more effectively. It's not about more bells and whistles. It's not about more features. It's about doing it to more people better, more efficiently.
Thank you. Tell us more about your role supporting startups and entrepreneurs to grow.
Yeah, so my job today is founder CEOs, as they go from 2 guys in a garage to several hundred people across the world. You have to go from being a specialist to being a leader of leaders. And you typically go from not making any money to either making money or being invested in by professional investors. That causes huge personal change and turmoil. So many of the people I work with are struggling with relationships, with sleep, with taking care of themselves, with running the business, with prioritizing their time, all this other stuff. And so I'm a coach to these founder CEOs, and I work with them on a weekly basis to resolve whatever is stopping them from essentially excelling at what they need to do. In some cases, it's all on the business. In most cases, it's about personal development, right? So how do I evolve from being a genius person who developed this thing to becoming a business leader, a true founder, and a true CEO in the company that I'm leading?
Yes, I love that. And the reason I love it is because sometimes it can be an emotional issue that kind of can create a big block, whether it's a relationship issue, whether it's that the entrepreneur is feeling stuck, whether they're feeling overwhelmed, burnt out. And I also feel that, like you said, a lot of entrepreneurs, what they do is that, they eat ramen for a gazillion days, and they take all the sacrifices that they have to take in order to take their business forward. But in that process, their close relationships, their family, their children, they can suffer in terms of perhaps there's no time for them, or there's not enough time for them. Maybe they miss their child's football game that is very important, and you could never get that back. And then, the impact of that is just so hard to kind of measure, because it can have a tremendous impact in terms of, your relationship breaks down, and then that emotional turmoil can have a significant impact, a long-term significant impact. And that's why I really love what you're doing. It sounds like a really interesting support for entrepreneurs to grow their business. And it's not only the actual elements of, okay, how do you actually grow the startup, but how do you grow as a person so that you're able to cope with these bigger challenges that you need to cope with, right?
And that's exactly right. I mean, a lot of people come to me thinking they have a business problem, but in reality, they have a personal problem, right? So some of my past clients, refer to me as their marriage counselor or their therapist or, their priest, essentially, right? So they talk to me about stuff that they don't feel like they can talk to their investor about, or their co-founder, or their spouse, or somebody else, because they don't want to be seen as weak towards their investors and their co-founder, or maybe there's a conflict with the co-founder that they need to resolve, and they don't know how to go home and say, honey, I'm terribly sorry. I know I've been absent for the last 2 years. Really want us to get back together again. Here are the changes I'm going to make so that we're not struggling at home. They don't know how to do that. And so what I do is I essentially, it's not rocket science, I help them get back to the person that they were and the person that they want to be, both at home and at the office. And in most cases, within a few weeks from working with me, they're much better. And then within a few months, it sticks and their life has changed for a much better trajectory.
Thank you. What marketing tools do you think that entrepreneurs should take in order to scale their business?
Well, I think in the beginning, you have to think about awareness, right? So how do more people know what we're doing and could be potential customers? So in the beginning, customers are more important than anything, even more important than investors. You need to prove that somebody wants to buy whatever you're selling. And so what I recommend to everybody is be public about what you do, right? We talked about LinkedIn before. Write on LinkedIn. Write a couple of times on LinkedIn about something happening in your business or some topic that you're interested in. Don't ask for anything. Just share what you're doing. Share your journey. You can do the same thing on Instagram. You can do the same thing on X or Twitter. There are plenty of environments where you can talk publicly about what you're doing. What happens if you do that consistently, not just for a few weeks, but consistently through your journey? People will notice. And out of the woodwork would come folks who are like maybe potential investors, potential customers, potential employees. People will cheer for you if you share publicly. So that's number one in terms of tools. I might be alone on this. I don't think a startup should spend any money on paid marketing in the early days because you don't know if you have a product that the market wants. You don't know if you have product market fit. So instead of spending Facebook ads driving people to come buy your thing, I'd go back to saying, hand-holding Lily and Susan and Bob and all my friends and saying, here's my thing, play with it. Tell me what you think. How is that going to work? And use them and spend your time and money on them rather than some random stranger who compares you to a finished product, right? You don't have something that's finished. So you're essentially selling the dough instead of the bread at that point. And I'd rather work with the dough with my trusted advisors than I would work with the random customer.
Thank you. What's the best way to find organic leads beyond your immediate friends from social media marketing?
Back to writing about it. So I've written on LinkedIn for the last 3.5 years. I have 47,000 followers on LinkedIn. It still blows my mind. That's a fairly big number on that platform. And that's just because I've been public about how I feel about different topics. So I would say to people, write or record videos if you're more comfortable doing that than writing, and share it. In the beginning, you're going to have barriers. You're like, oh, what if I sound stupid. I don't like to see myself on camera, or I don't know how to write. Nobody cares. Just get it out there and you'll get leads from that. I guarantee if you keep going. Consistency here is key. I think what I see is people get started on LinkedIn, for example, and they get, maybe 2 or 3 likes, maybe a couple of hundred views. And they're like, this thing is not working. But that's kind of like going to the gym and expecting you to do 1 push-up and then you're going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Not happening. You have to put in the reps, also on social. And so that's what I recommend people doing.
Thank you. Do you recommend sharing authentic vulnerabilities on LinkedIn, or do you recommend talking only about impactful things you have done to get results in your business?
I recommend people to be people, be human. Right? If you and I sat next to each other at a cocktail party and I just told you about how great I was and how fantastic everything was and how I got everything in control, at the end of the evening, you would kind of think he's a blowhard, right? He's showing off. But if I sat down and shared with you saying, hey, Lily, I'm struggling building this company because, I can't quite figure out my product market fit and we've tried these different things. You'd find me much more engaging and interesting. You might have some ideas. You might even say, you know what, Peter? I know this guy who might be able to help you. And the same thing happens on social. So the more honest you are, the more vulnerable you are, the more people will gravitate towards you and want to help you. So again, ego left the building a long time ago. Just share what's going on in your world and you'll see people being generous in return.
Thank you. I find that, for example, when I'm just walking in the park and I'm sharing something about my business, that is a result, for example, and especially if it's a moving scene where I'm turning, and something is happening in the background where they're not quite sure what's going to happen. I find that tends to get more views And I find that, for example, when you have a static background, it kind of tends to get less views. Do you have a similar opinion or result in your personal social media? Or did you use other tools in order to get higher engagement, more likes, more comments, more followers, and more engagement with what you're offering?
So that's a big question. I think what you're talking about is trying to kind of game the algorithm or do something that gets you something. I think that the fundamental question here is, is it more important to have 10,000 followers or to have 100 paying customers, right? And I think we get lost a little bit in my account needs to be big in order for me to be successful. So I know people on LinkedIn who have 1,000 connections, who have 4 or 5 likes per post for making $100,000 a month from LinkedIn. So I really would encourage people who are listening to this to stop worrying about likes and comments and all that other stuff. Just be you, share what's going on with you. There's 1 billion people on LinkedIn. That's the platform I know the best. There's 1 billion people on there. There will be enough people who will buy whatever you're selling, no matter what that is. If you're very honest and transparent with what you're building, if you're talking about it. It might take a long time, but this is a long game. Not a lot of companies are built overnight. So if you put in the reps, your customers will find you.
Thank you. What's the best way to structure your communication in order to make sure that you're getting the right reach to the right customers that will like you?
I argue that it's the format that you're most comfortable in. I'm fairly comfortable sitting here talking to you on video. So I like doing video because that's how I express myself. I'm also comfortable writing, but I wasn't when I started. So I'd encourage people to do whatever comes natural to you. If it's doing a podcast like this, do a podcast and talk to people about the things that you care about and then distribute that. If you're good at writing or if you enjoy writing, write about it. And if you like being on video, then do that. It doesn't really matter the format that you do. What matters is that people feel who you are, right? When you and I have finished today, there's a good chance you're going to remember this conversation because of the way that I was animated, hopefully engaging, hopefully shared something that was valuable to you. But this is who I am. Other people might be more like still and not so comfortable. And so maybe video is not the right format for them.
Thank you. If you're a startup that is looking for investment and you want to reach 100K users or customers, what's the best way to turn the switch where instead of being the one that is chasing investors, that you become the one that investors chase after because you're so great?
My grandfather used to say, empty barrels make the most noise. And I think that's the same from an investor perspective. Investors know that the best companies are the ones that don't really make a big presence of themselves. The best companies are the guys and girls that are building something somewhere in quiet, focusing on their customers, not telling the entire world about it. So if I was interested in getting investment to a new company, I would not start pitching investors. I would not start spending a lot on marketing. I would build my product service. I would take care of my customers, and I'd write about it, what happened, what we were learning, how we were developing it, and then trust that the right investors would come to me.
That is so interesting. And once you have those investors that come to you, what's the best way to phrase your language so that you make sure the messaging kind of lands well and leads to an actual investment?
Many founders make the mistake of explaining a bunch of stuff that's not relevant for the investor. So they spend a lot of time, they talk a lot, and the investor already zones out. The investor essentially needs to know a few key things. What are you building? You should be able to say that in 3 sentences. Why does it matter what you're building, right? What is the problem that you're solving? We're building a thing that looks like this and does this. That's relevant because this is the problem that it's solving. The people who are building this are these people. It's me, I have this background, it's this person, that background, this person, that background. We're looking for an investment of this amount of money that we're going to spend on this thing. That's all. A lot of startup founders spend a ton of time explaining all sorts of things about the world, and percent in China buys it, and we're going to be rich, and we're like, TikTok for kindergarten. I don't know. Nobody cares. What you need to do is you need to make sure that the investor gets what you're building, why it's important, who's building it, how much money you're looking for, and what you're going to use it for. And then let the investor ask questions. Say, hey, Peter, tell me more about this thing. Okay, great. Here you go. Anything else you need to know? Tell me more about that thing. Similar to a dinner conversation. Right now I'm doing a lot of the talking because I'm on your podcast. But you'd be more interested in me if we were at a dinner party talking, if you actually did the talking, right? And that's the same with investors. They care more about you if they get to ask questions instead of just listening to some long story that actually doesn't interest them.
Follow us for more interviews with world's most influential business titans, providing you with the insights to awaken to your full potential, so you can get paid to be yourself, find true happiness, and manifest anything you desire.